So speaker number one, I'm a huge fan of this person. They've been on the podcast. We had a slight moment where I had to write the copy for my website, and Nikita's website is so good. I basically just wanted all his copy. So in the end, I said, can we just say that we just believe what you believe and that we love what you think? And can we just start incorporating that into MKAI? And Nikita said, yes, we could. So if you look at our website, it says we are inspired by the Open Ethics Manifesto and openethics.ai, which is Nikita's website. It is absolutely phenomenal. So he founded that initiative, which fosters inclusive dialogue between experts and citizens to design systems where humans and AI successfully work together. Not only that, this is a man who keeps busy. He's the founder and CTO of PocketConfidant AI, 24/7 coaching technology powered by artificial intelligence. And I'm sure he'll give a mention for that, or we'll find some links we can put up to that. He was previously a fellow with SIGNALIFE Ph.D. program in life sciences in France. He's worked on supervised and unsupervised learning algorithms for neuronal classification, bridging approaches in neurobiology and statistical learning. This is Nikita Lukianets. We've got half an hour on the clock, including questions. Nikita, you are very, very welcome. It's great to see you. The time is yours.
Hi, everyone, again. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi from Kiev. It's almost a late evening. Right now it's 7, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen right now with the presentation. So tell me if you can see it already, and tell me if you can see the big screen or a small screen.
We've got your notes.
Okay, so great. Let me try to swap it. Okay. Hopefully it goes.
Somebody should put some AI in PowerPoint, but that's just...
Yes, it worked, Nikita. I think it worked because now we only see the presentation.
Okay, good. So I'd like to start with definitions. And the definition is following: AI is what doesn't exist yet. And why this one? Because as we move in technology development and in acceptance of technology, we stop calling AI what we used to call it 20 years ago. What I find very useful is to talk about two main things in environment perception and action, and how do we adapt to this, and how we make things better. This what constitutes intelligence, and the contextuality of both of this point is very important. When we talk about AI ethics, it's not about Hollywood-like movies, but it's more about how we as humans decide where we put technology and how we shape it and design it. Always we can ask ourselves, what is the threat and who's responsible? Like we can do for any other technology, where engineers construct them and managers deploy them, we always can trace back to the original source of the problem. And why the ethics, the question of ethics became so important, and it was not so evident 20, 30, or 40 years ago, is because we're moving towards deep learning, and deep learning approaches allow machines to define criteria for decision making without explicitly having us specifying the rules. We're moving towards this because our computing power allow us to do so, and we're moving towards it in every single element of the decision-making process, on the perception, on the decision, on the action, and on the evaluation. We want to make it better at every single moment in time, but the problem today is that roughly 80% of consumers expect companies to deliver these technologies that are safe, and only 1/3 do something and report that they do have a framework to achieve it. As a result, I'm sure many of you have observed, and some of you have also took place in designing of this guidelines or top-down approaches that can limit the negative impact of technology. But what's interesting is that the top-down regulation is not the only version of the regulation. And as Lawrence Lessig told us in his fabulous work 20 years ago, is that we have other sources of regulation or constraints in technology, such as norms or architecture or a market-driven regulation. And what we see today is that it's if you look at top-down regulation that exists today, there are more than 100 different regulations, or I'll call them initiatives, but because it's not yet a standard that is imposed on us. And if we carefully observe them, most of them have constructed a hierarchy of values that they're supposed to govern or support. And this work from the last year by Thilo Heignhoff talks about how they relate to each other and which frameworks are supporting which sorts of values. And what we did, we mapped different initiatives based on two axes: the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach for the regulation, and the another axis that is more inclined to support users, or is more trying to make sure that it is transparent on the company side. So now the question is, how do you actually make this all policies work? Because you want a government or transnational structures such as OECD or United Nations to harmonize the policy on one side, but on the other side, you want policy to be actionable. And one document that I particularly recommend on it is to look at the last year study by the European Parliament group that published a set of recommendations on how the factual on how the value related aspects could be translated into technology practices. If you want to look at how policies are done on the global scale, have a look at Future of Life Institute. But I'm not going to talk much about policy today. I want just the last note about it, and I want to mention Ubuntu. And it's not Ubuntu that is on the left, but Ubuntu that is on the right. A culture that, in one word or in one phrase, could be defined as "I am because we are." And the Ubuntu's take on Ubuntu culture's take on the digital policy is particularly focused on non-discriminating and making sure that the policy making process is inclusive. And from this, I want to jump to the main element of the talk. Is I want to talk with you about food and the story of how the food market has been shaped and regulated. And it has been shaped for the last 35 years the way we know it. We know there are different kinds of food, and because there are different kinds of food, the process can be sometimes very difficult in the choice. But we are lucky because we have, apart from governments who or the certification bodies that decide on the acceptable level of quality, there isn't a very interesting element that is a labeling requirement for food. And what labeling requirement for food delivers to us is the common way. We talk about proteins and fats, we talk about allergen labeling, we talk about tracing of food sources and food production. The same way we do in construction, the same way we do in electrical appliance business. But sadly and very strangely, we have nothing like that in the information technology space. And when consumer is about to purchase the food or purchase the IT product or start using it, there is absolutely no way for him or her to decide based on risk elements, not based on features. We have a feature comparison websites like Compare or Alternative 2, but we have very few information about risks. So how does this relate to ethics, and what can we do on this regard? Well, probably we have we need to invent a way and a standardized language to talk about ethical values and practices that are used to implement it. And if we have this way of talking about ethical practices, we can probably reach to a point, to a place where consumers can make decisions. So if we have a certain set of values, and if one consumer has a point of view and prioritizes one set of values, and the other consumer would prioritize another set of values, we have a chance that at some point all products will have either an alternative versions or at least the categorizations based on different sorts of alternatives or support of different different extents for every of those value elements. It's like a system of coordinate on which we define what we want, and that helps us to understand what is for us a definition of good and what is for us a definition of bad. Product, of course, information technology product and use of data. And for this, what we did and what we developed is a disclosure technology. It's an open source technology that makes everyone every product owner or technology owner, to disclose the practices that they do on three key elements, which are the training data sets that influence bias, that they can collect personal identifiable information and therefore be a sources of cybersecurity vulnerabilities. The source code, which could be either a proprietary or an open source, and a decision space, which is a very important element when we start scoping the use of products and understanding how one product can integrate to another. And what this tooling does for a product owner, it allows to disclose the practices and generate the label, then place a label on the website, which doesn't necessarily share any information with open ethics or require trust in open ethics, but makes it public in a standardized way. So what we're hoping to arrive to with this is very similar to what we have in nutrition tables with a product, is a visual block, a readable and humanly understandable and scannable block of icons and descriptions that are as simple as this product is selling your data, or this product is using your data for research purposes, or this product is not collecting any of your personal information and you're totally anonymous, so that we can get to a situation where every single AI-powered product will have its passport. And this passport could be shared across the supply chain, and every player in the supply chain, or data processor or data controller, can have an idea about where is the weak chain in the supply chain. Therefore, we can treat this sorts of disclosures both on programmatic way, and we can allow policymakers to be also to have policies that are enforceable, because today the only instrument, unfortunately, that policymakers do have in their hands is fear, and because they're on the instrument sphere, the typical behavior of a regulator would be to find a company which is violating, but this will be typically a big company, but not necessarily because the big company is violating more than a small company, but because the impact of the media product resulting from a scandal or from the fee that will work with this big company will make others consider very seriously the rules from the regulator. Not necessarily the regulator is able to cover the long tail of the market. And as a result, there are only maybe 100 or 200 companies that are checked per market, because the resources of the regulator are typically limited. And on this, I would like to open a discussion rather than doing a long lecture on what is self-disclosure. There is an invitation that I want to make, which is we're going to conduct a self-disclosure workshop. So, and this is a call for companies. This is completely free. We're doing this with Montreal Institute for AI Ethics. And we're going to select only 6 companies to work with on this phase, and we will help them and guide them through the disclosure process. And all the other people are invited to be a mirror for this disclosure process and to help these companies formulate their disclosure and therefore formulate their awareness and bring them to the awareness about what could be done. So on this note, I would like to open the discussion and ask you, ladies and gentlemen, for questions if you have ones. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you so much for your lovely talk. I think it has been wonderful to see this, and we do understand and echo with you that just having the top-down regulatory
I think you're muted.
Very, very quiet.
Is it better now? I increased.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we could just hear you. That's why I didn't interrupt.
Sorry, I'm so sorry about it. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Nikita, for your talk. And I think everybody can echo in here that, having just a top-down approach to the AI regulatory is not just enough. It is important to understand what is the asymmetry in data and information, basically, and also giving a choice to consumers to help them understand what are the good choices and making them aware of the potential risks, the safety practices, and how we can extend this transparency, not just in algorithms, data sets, but how product owners can actually give it to their own products in order to drive this whole ecosystem together in view. I can see that, and especially protecting even the companies who are themselves, following the ethics in their policies. I think that really is the key, and the 3 A's that you have highlighted through your talk, that is quite important as well. And thank you for inviting for the workshop. I'm sure many will be interested, to learn more about this. And now I would like to hand over to Richard, but I think there are a few questions. Can I just go on then? All right. What are the 3 biggest risks in AI ethics? That comes from Marcus. Nikita, if you could just answer the questions.
AI ethics should be, or AI should be treated not. We should have a starting point. AI is information system. It carries, first of all, it carries all those risks that any information system is carrying. These are cybersecurity risks. These are privacy risks. These are threats to lack of precision or accuracy of AI systems. So it doesn't necessarily have to deal with deep learning or machine learning in general. What aggravates the situation with this sorts of risks is the fact that with AI systems, we bring training data sets into play, and we do not necessarily impose our rules on decision making, meaning that we have less control on the input for these systems. I'm not talking right now about reliability. I'm only talking about the fact that we have a low understanding and about the training data sets. Training data sets do carry historical data labeled by humans. Not knowing the ethical background or just the cultural background of those humans who labeled this data put us in the situation when we do not necessarily know what is going to influence the results of the machine. So for us, the risks are, apart from being precise and robust and resilient as IT systems, are slightly more complex because we have to start dealing with bias and non-discrimination and fairness, for which we have many definitions. There are a lot of definitions for fairness, a dozen's definitions for fairness. It may happen that we will not end up in finding the perfect definition for fairness, but it's important that we carry information about which ethical framework are we operating in, and this ethical framework is communicated to the user, so the user is know which kind of rules is played in the system. I'm not talking about the rule base here. I'm talking about the rule of the game or rule of societal decision making. What we typically in human societal systems, what we typically call norms. These are unwritten rules of how people tend to act. How they relate to each other. This is transmitted to machines, and this could be transmitted in a very simple narrow tasks, such as understanding who is on the picture or treating the language as language that is discriminating or violent or aggressive or just normal, right? So I hope I answered the question.
Thanks, Nikita. I'm sure this has answered Marcus' question. There are quite a lot of questions. Let me try and cover as much as possible. Odessa had her hand raised up. So Odessa, would you like to take over and ask your question? It would be great.
Hi there, yeah. And obviously we talk about AI not being currently standardized. Do you think that needs to change? And if so, what kind of standard and protocol would you like to see in place?
I absolutely think that top-down regulation should be in place and bottom-up regulation should be in place. Now, the question that I'm paddling and trying to move forward is a so-called transparency protocol or open ethics transparency protocol, which is an instrument that will allow every product owner, regardless, every product, AI product, to have a disclosure and to have these disclosures being shared between between products first, and as a result, also having a composite disclosure that will be available for humans. What I do very much agree to is a NIST framework on AI safety. If you look at a NIST framework, it is very simple, and it makes this framework stand out from the others. It is very explicit. It talks about things that could be measured. If things could be measured, we can say clearly about whether we fit a standard or whether we don't fit a standard, or at least whether we follow a certain practices. What do we have to work on? And addition to that, I'm sorry, is I very much support the approach on autonomy and of the user, where the user or consumer should be perfectly fine without technology in place, meaning that regardless of how we deploy, we should always be able to back to the normal back to the normal process and have a human in the loop to either object the decisions or to make sure that we bring a reasonable feedback loop into place.
So Nikita, can I go ahead with the next question?
Sure.
Yeah, because there are quite a lot. So there's one from Paul where he has asked how to put control over self-supervised and learning AI machines so that they will stick to compliance, ethics, and standard.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm here. I'm here understanding what do you mean by self-supervised. Are you talking about the data, or you're talking about the fully autonomous system without human in the loop?
Paul, could you unmute and I think put the question yourself to Nikita? I think that would be great because I can see you have two questions, Paul.
Yeah, so it was regarding fully automated machines actually.
So what rules have to be, your question is, what rules have to be put in place? For fully autonomous systems, again, we have to have a way to provide a feedback. A user has to have a way to provide the feedback. There could be different users. The user could be an API. The user could be an API that is calling to another API that is calling to another API, and the cascade of downstream data processing could be pretty rich. So first of all, we have to have a standard reporting on errors. Like we have reporting on errors in HTTP protocol. There are standard cases like 2000, 200, 300, 400 type errors. These errors, when a good software designer is creating a software, he communicates that. This should be done for any AI system. Whether we should expand this or not, already HTTP protocol and error response classification is good start. So it should be maintained. Now, if we're talking about the system with finite decision spaces or countable decision spaces, we should communicate the topology of the data. So we should talk our system, besides giving outputs, should communicate what is the range of the output that this system is capable of providing, so that the downstream data processing mechanisms would be able to understand if the vendor goes mad in quotes, right? If something happens upstream, we obviously need to understand what sort of privacy measures has been taken in place, and I think Open Web Application Security Project is also a good benchmark. So if we look at OWASP, and if we look at how they what kind of recommendation do they provide for designing of physical systems or cyber physical system, it's a good start. I mean, there are many things we could do. We can do SOC 1, SOC 2 towards cybersecurity. They're all good, but we need to start somewhere. So I more like concrete examples. So if you can provide a system we're talking about, we can brainstorm, definitely.
Yeah. I think great talk, and you have covered some of the questions, but there are quite a lot of questions coming in, Nikita. I'm sure people want more information, and the chat is all yours. I think if you could just pick up the questions from the chat, people would be really happy to take over from there. I would call in Richard to invite the next speaker. Yeah, Richard. Over
Jesus,
to
thank
you.
you. Thank you so much for handing over to me. We had so many questions there. Let's see what we can fit in as we go through this. Let's see what we can do at the end. We do finish on time, though. That's what we do. But thank you for your enthusiasm. Nikita, if your fingers are available to come and answer some of those things as well, that would be amazing. Hopefully, Matthew can pick up on some of these things as we go through and really make sure that we dig into this.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so very, very much, Nikita. You are really the real deal in this area, and it's so important, your work. Right.